Welcome to our first podcast talking about the world of enterprise tech and what you really need to be thinking about from an executive perspective and how your environment will be affected by the world of business and the world of tech. I'm Hyoun Park. I'm the chief analyst here at Amalgam Insights, and I'm joined here by Charlie Araujo.
Hi there. It was so great to be with you. I'm super excited about this conversation and about really this entire approach, mostly because I would say this is what I've done for most of the last 15, 20 years of my career, where I'd have enterprise execs in particular saying, okay, Charlie, you're out there kind of engaged with all that's going on in the world. What do we make sense? How do we make sense of all of this? And that's what I hope we do on this conversation. I know I have great respect for you and your perspective on things. And I love following what you are doing because we cover a lot of the same topics, but from just slightly different perspectives. And so I'm very excited to these conversations. I think it is a tough time. If you're an enterprise IT leader right now, it is just a challenging time to make sense of all of this and to cope with all of it. And so maybe we can do our part to at least simplify and provide some interesting perspectives on a few little pieces of it. So just as by way of introduction for myself, my name is Charles Araujo. I am an independent industry analyst, author, speaker. At my core, I'm an IT guy. I ran IT organizations 25 years ago. Spent another decade running large scale transformation programs, and so that's always the perspective that I bring to any conversation like this. So I'm really excited for this.
Terrific. So one of the things, first things I was thinking about is that we are in a very strange time for tech. There are a lot of layoffs happening, even as tech companies are showing record profits. And we're trying to figure out, what does a sustainable technology company look like in terms of being a vendor, in terms of providing products. And we both happened to be at an analyst event for Zoho very recently, where they take a very different approach to the standard Microsoft or Oracle perspective of working in tech. And I was wondering, given your perspective on digital transformation, what did you think of their approach on trying to provide a wide suite of capabilities, as well as their philosophy of transnational localism, which is probably going to need its own bit of definition and explanation in and of itself.
Yeah, we'll save the transnational localism thing because that is a whole topic, I think. But let me address the first part. It's interesting. I don't think we even talked about this, but I'm working on an article about this exact topic. I think for many enterprise leaders, they probably have either not heard about Zoho at all or just sort of like barely. It's like, oh, I think I know they do X, Y, or Z. And Zoho is a really fascinating company. They came from, their roots are focusing on the SMB, the small business. That's where they started. So that's why a lot of enterprises don't know who they are. And they have a massive suite of over 50 applications crossing everything from CRM to and market automation to a low code platform and almost everything in between. And we have this debate, or I don't know if you have this debate with them. I have this debate with them because one of their taglines, at least, was the operating system for business. And I think it applies very well in an enterprise context because I think most enterprise organizations are struggling with how to rationalize all these pieces together, all these moving parts that they have to deal with. And I think this leads really into a conversation that's happening right now about how enterprise organizations are sort of struggling to begin this rationalization process. And I think it's part and parcel to being a transformational agent and why Zoho can help organizations do that. So I think we're in the very early stages, but I actually think in the grand scheme of things, it serves organizations better to have that sort of broad approach and a broad suite of applications to draw from to sort of take the knitting off the table and focus on those things that they can use to drive transformational value.
Yeah, it's interesting because honestly, when you look out at the world at large, despite all the companies calling themselves platforms, there really are very few companies that truly have a consistent data layer and a UX and can actually provide a suite of services that can help run your company across multiple departments. Even large platforms like Salesforce. Salesforce has a lot of applications. They aren't necessarily aggregated into a single platform. You still have these separate applications in practice when you are working across all of your different departments. MuleSoft and Tableau are not Salesforce CRM, which is fine. It's how many companies work. Same with Oracle, where they've grabbed these applications over time or developed them over 20, 25 years. And it's not quite one integrated suite across the board in the same way that Zoho has, or I would say ServiceNow has. There are very few companies that have been able to maintain that consistency of data and user capabilities and be able to upgrade that on a regular basis. So I think that's a very difficult thing to do, and that's where I think that Zoho has done a fantastic job of maintaining that consistency over time and not being tempted to build that one separate app that is off the beaten path and then never being able to bring it back in house into the actual platform, an actual platform, right?
It's an interesting organization because unlike all the other companies you've just mentioned, they do not acquire technology. They build everything from scratch. And that should, in most cases, result in an organization that is moving more slowly. And I think in some cases that's the case. But for the most part, one of their other taglines is that Zoho runs on Zoho. And so what I think is fascinating is that part of the reason I think we've seen the elevation of their applications into enterprise grade classes is because they themselves have become an enterprise. They're over $1 billion in revenue now. They have 15,000 employees spread across, 40 countries or something. And so all of the challenges that if you're a small to medium-sized enterprise, right? So not an SMB, but like a $500 million to $5 billion company, all these challenges, well, they face all these same challenges. And they've built all of these products themselves to run their business. And what's interesting is part of that, I don't know if this is the secret sauce inside baseball for them, but they have historically operated where these very autonomous teams. So part of how they solved the move fast enough problem was that every team was sort of empowered to operate independently. They could go do whatever they wanted. And that meant they moved quickly and they were able to keep pace with their other competitors because they were effectively like a startup within this big, large company. But one of the net negatives of that was that they were sort of disjointed. Well, over the last few, maybe decade, I guess, they built this common data platform, as you mentioned, a common data architecture that everything sits on top of. And it's vertically integrated across the entire suite. So if you look at their architecture, they've got these sort of foundational pieces that sit across the bottom. They've got core that sits across the bottom. They run their own data centers. They run all their own data stack. Then they got a core set of applications like their data analytics platform, which they call Analytics, their low-code platform. They got these, and some new ones are adding. And then they've got these vertical applications like the CRM, marketing automations, a desk product, which is like for customer support, that all sit on top of that. And so if I'm a CIO today, I look at it and go, that's fabulous, because I don't have to buy all of it. I can pick and choose the parts I want, but it does have that foundational layer that it all sits on. And that starts allowing, to your point, meaning I can stop worrying about some of this stuff. And it just sort of happens in the background because it was built that way. And then it becomes what I view as a sort of transformational agent because I can take some of the stuff off my plate. The amount of time and energy organizations spend customizing, modifying, trying to make these big platforms like some of these other companies deliver work is enormous. It's just a massive amount of energy. And what I think is interesting with Zoho's approach, and as they've sort of grown into their boots, is that they've taken so much of that off the plate for, at least for the right, for the organization that's the right fit for them.
Right. And honestly, whenever I see that, I think of my old job in IT. A lot of my work was around data integration and application integration and simply getting things to mostly work with SAP. And there's a lot of work involved in that, no doubt. Even just getting SAP instances, to talk to each other, much less bringing in the other hundreds or thousands of applications that you might have. And being able to get rid of much of that for a significant group of your business, a significant percentage of your business, is an important task to be able to complete. One of the things I was also thinking about there is that, as Zoho has grown, basically 10x over the past 10 years by whatever count you want to do, employees, customers, revenue. I'm reminded of something that Zuora's CEO, Tian Zhou, said, that basically every time you 3x your company, you need to transform the way your company works. And for most companies, that's true. You usually gain an extra layer of management, or you have some sort of level of decentralization as you go from 100 to 300, 300 to 1,000, 1,000 to 3,000. And Zoho, interestingly enough, hasn't really had to do that because of this decentralized approach. But on the other hand, decentralized companies tend to have a cap on how big that they can grow. Like the other big company I can think of that was fairly decentralized in decision making was Zappos, the clothing company, and they never grew past a couple thousand, because at some point you can't. It's very difficult to coordinate that decentralized decision making, or you have too many egos that get in the way. So it's very interesting for me to see that they have been able to maintain this level of decentralized decision making while maintaining a fairly consistent management team and management structure.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. And in part, they are militantly non-public, right? They are militantly private and have every intention of staying that way. They are not driven by many of the same things that Silicon Valley or the street would drive organizations to do. And that's all very intentional on their part. I do think it has hindered them a bit. I mean, I think, I was talking with some other analysts, and, to compete in some of the spaces they're trying to compete, they need to be larger. They need to have, I think, more reach. I think they're okay not having it. They're okay letting this sort of play out. And that's, more power to them, to the extent that they are very much a mission driven and principally driven organization. They are not, I've had other companies be described as a rocket ship tied to a rocket ship. They are decidedly not that. There's this, phrase that we'll hear bandied about when we're at these events called the Zoho way. And that basically means slow and methodical. We're not chasing the shooting star like everybody else, kind of a thing. And I think in the grand scheme of things, to your point, that has largely paid off. They have built, I think, some very compelling products across a large chunk of their suite. They have, they call their annual customer event Zoholics for a reason, that their customers are often rabid fans. So I think they have a lot of really, really solid things working for them. I do think what's interesting about your statement is that I would argue their growing pains have been the opposite, because they've been so decentralized and because they are trying to grow and they are starting to move up market. Their growing pains have been how to centralize, how to bring a little less decentralization, a little more control, and maybe the right word is orchestration, to how they go to market, to how they develop the products, to make sure they have this overlap. And I think they're finding success with that. One of the products that I follow, actually two of the products I think both that you and I both follow pretty carefully. For me, it's Creator, their low-code platform. For you, it's Analytics, their data platform, or whatever we want to call this. These are both products that have been deeply embedded now into their vertical apps, right? Their CRM and their market automation and desk and financial systems and all of this. And historically, it was a big struggle. Like, I'm a user of Zoho products in some ways too. And it's like, I would use some of these and it's like, oh my God, this is so frustrating. It's like, I have to go over there to do that part and here to this part. And they are actively working to kind of close those gaps and have it work more seamlessly. And I think that's going to be super, super important as they continue to move deeper into the enterprise, because that's going to be the big selling point. But the good news for them is the underlying architecture is rock solid, and that's what it's all built on. So this is just about how they execute on it. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how this goes. I think at this last event, we saw some much bigger name companies there. I think it's going to be an interesting thing. And we should probably talk a little bit about their that I can never even say it, the transnational localism, and maybe you should explain it to talk, because I do think that's going to be part of their secret sauce as they try to what I'll call export their culture as part of a go-to-market strategy. And I think that given some of the angst that I hear from executives about dealing with some of these large tech companies, it could be this sort of secret weapon.
Yes, it's interesting that so Zoho basically talks about this mindset where they want to be a part of their community as they go into each new geography. They are often looking at mid-sized cities. So we were just in McAllen, Texas, actually, together, along with all the other analysts and the Zoho executive team. So not Houston, not Dallas, not Austin, not San Antonio. I could probably name a half dozen other Texas cities, El Paso, et cetera, before I even get to McAllen. And that kind of shows where their focus is as a company. Similar to when they came to California, they didn't go deeply into in the heart of Silicon Valley. They were out a little bit in Pleasanton, and then Pleasanton became a tech city over time. But really, Zoho looks for these opportunities to be in smaller cities that aren't necessarily tech hubs, where they can contribute more to the community as a whole, because they see themselves as being good. I guess we would call it corporate citizens, but they just see it as being part of the community. And they think about this both from a technology perspective, and then even from an ecological perspective. Being carbon neutral is a goal that they have. They grow food on their farms that are on campus. They do all sorts of things that are about being better for the community and for the environment than most tech companies even think about.
Yeah, and I think it's, like I said, I think it's fascinating. I know it was interesting being in McAllen, hearing the local city officials and the county official just gushing over them about how they were contributing and bringing jobs and all of that. And I think that's great. Now, they're not alone. There are a lot of organizations. I mean, certainly I would argue Salesforce has made a big effort around, a lot of the things that they're kind of pushing out and being good citizens. What I think is different or interesting about Zoho specifically is, we talked about the Zoho way, this idea. And I think it does manifest sometimes. Like I will watch message boards a lot, and you'll see people complain about Zoho's relatively slow rate of development in some ways, or response in certain areas. And that's all sort of driven by the same idea. There's this heavy commitment to the work-life balance of their employees, to their overall employee well-being, to not having this rocket ship tied to a rocket ship sort of mentality where it's success or driving the market forward at all costs. And so, you see this sort of balance out. And so it's like, I chuckle sometimes when I see people complaining, mostly because I do know the inside baseball part of this. So like, I understand how they work internally and why it then comes across this way. But what is fascinating is you talk to the employees. I mean, I sometimes say it becomes a parlor game for me. It's like, well, I find someone at this event at Zoho who is unhappy, or is willing to say, like, here's the problem, this is what's driving me nuts. And it's really, really hard. Where I mean, just bluntly, when I'm at other events, it is not hard to find somebody kind of slamming their tech company they work for, And so it's really interesting. I think they've done a really good job of that. They're extremely committed to their values. And going back to the secret weapon idea, I think what's interesting is, look, at the end of the day, if you're an enterprise buyer, you're looking for companies that ultimately deliver the value that they promised you. But once you sort of check those boxes, then you're looking for a partner that you think is going to be around for a long time, that is going to treat their people well, which means their people are going to be around for a long time. They're going to take care of you. They're going to do what's right for you. And that's where I think in the end, and Zoho is reaching parity across much of their suite at least the kind of baseline enterprise level. These now start becoming winning characteristics when enterprise buyers are looking to partner with somebody. So I think it's gonna be really interesting to see you talk about 10X over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, I've only been covering them for about 7. 10 years ago, they were not on radar anywhere. Now you fast forward 10 years later, and it's like they're starting to get picked up. I think the next 10 years is going to be a really fascinating period to watch. So we'll see where that plays out.
Yeah, honestly, 10 years ago, I thought of Zoho as a niche CRM player. I don't cover CRM, so that basically meant they were irrelevant to me because I look at data, analytics, and finance applications. And then over the past decade, they have gotten into each of these areas and gotten significant traction, thousands of customers, enough to at least be on the radar in each of these areas.
Definitely. So you ready to switch topics?
Sure, absolutely.
All
Going
right.
in.
Well, I want to
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. No. What are you thinking?
Well, I want to go like other end of the world, but to another company I'm a huge fan of. Unlike Zoho, this company is known by I think everyone in the world probably, and that is of course Apple, and their new Vision Pro product, which interestingly, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook recently, who not surprised anyone, has a competing product called the Quest 3, I think, their own kind of glasses. And so he recorded a video giving a honest assessment of the Vision Pro, and no surprise to anybody, he panned it a bit, actually quite a bit, right? But what I'm really curious about is this, and you know, we are here looking at it from the enterprise perspective, and this to me signals three things. First is that, say what you want about Apple has always been extremely good at sort of reading the tea leaves and saying this is the next big thing. And they are almost never first, as evidenced by, you know, the Oculus and now the Quest, whatever, and the fact that people have been talking about this for a long time. But when they enter a market, they typically enter it very big. And I think we're seeing that. And when they enter that market, you typically look back and say, okay, what's going to happen next? Because they're going to be this driving force to drive adoption, to drive change. And I fully expect that's the case. And in the case of the enterprise, while the Vision Pro is not explicitly being marketed as an enterprise tool, there's a handful of folks, one of the writers for the New York Times, for the Wall Street Journal, a few people have been using this in a business setting and putting some interesting data out about how it's being applied. And so I'm looking at this from sort of two perspectives. One, I've been pretty bullish on the corporate metaverse application at some point in the future. And secondly, this whole idea of quote unquote spatial computing, because on the one hand, if I were to break this down, there's sort of two primary use cases. There's the entertainment factor of using it for photos or immersive video or whatever. But the second, and this is the one that I'm most interested in, is this idea that I don't need a physical monitor, that I can sit at my desk and have this headset on and have massive monitors that I can change at will, and changing. And so what you're seeing people, you know, comparing it with a physical keyboard and a physical trackpad or mouse or whatever, and we're using this dynamic working environment. And then one of the more interesting use cases is being able to leave a digital asset, a virtual monitor in a room, in a space where it's like I can go and have a physical space where I'm working on these things, then I go to another physical space. And I think it could just have these really dramatic changes to the nature of office work, particularly when you throw in things like this idea of the future of work. Are we working remotely? We're working in offices, and how do we bring all this stuff with us? I mean, I don't have answers. I'm like a wash in the possibilities of it. And so I'm curious what you think about it. And you know, I know this is an area that you also sort of cover. So I'm just curious, is this a big deal, or is this a whole lot of nothing hype, particularly from an enterprise perspective?
So Apple has proven me wrong multiple times on what is it and isn't an enterprise product. When I first saw the iPhone come out, BlackBerry was ascendant, and the Nokia Symbian phones were still doing just fine. And I thought this was a toy. This is never going to last. The security isn't even any good. I don't understand why everybody's buying into the Steve Jobs hype. 2 years later, it is the dominant smartphone in the world, for all intents and purposes. So obviously, Apple has the ability to build amazing device ecosystems, and then they did the same thing with the iPad. They did the same thing with the App Store, and this is another product where. So I feel like I don't understand it intuitively, but the idea of having a bigger screen is definitely something that matters. Like as I've gotten older, I've started using these more and noticing I needed the bigger screen. That the bigger the better. Definitely. And this definitely plays into that theme, if nothing else, that the iPhone users from 15 years ago now need a little bit more screen space and don't necessarily want to buy a fixed monitor to use it. So I kind of get that. This also reminds me actually of long ago when the Cisco telepresence rooms first came out. And it was actually a very cool product. You had a big screen TV. You could have face-to-face contact and eye contact with whoever you were speaking to. You had spatial audio, so you could tell where the person was talking from or talking to, and you could actually talk to somebody else from thousands of miles away. Of course, the problem there is it cost $500,000 plus bandwidth, and only 6 people in the company got to use it, so it ended up being a very vanity project basically. But these goggles, these virtual reality headsets definitely provide the opportunity for that to change, whether it's Apple or the Facebook Oculus or some version of the Microsoft HoloLens or Google Glass. All these players, all the big tech players have some sort of technology that they have launched in the past 5 years in this space. They're doing different things from an augmented reality perspective, but I think there's something here. I think we're going to struggle a bit to figure out the exact right use cases. And at first we're going to see a bunch of 3D movies and kind of cool things like James Cameron Avatar type stuff. But ultimately, there's going to be some interesting enterprise use cases as well.
What I think is interesting about it is there's 2 factors here. One is, I think to a certain extent, Apple is uncharacteristically early into this market. And what I mean by that is I think they've nailed, and I haven't seen it myself, so I'm just basing this on watching videos of others. But I think they've nailed the interface. From everything I can understand, the visual interaction and the ability to use gestures and all that, they've nailed that. Where I think that the gap is, and I think they did a great job in what I've seen so far, but it's still clunky. Like, I have trouble, to your point, I have trouble imagining myself standing around all day. From what I've understood in some of the reading is that it's impractical for more than a couple of hours. Well, I work more than a couple of hours a day, so we're clearly not there. The battery is an issue, the weight is an issue, all of these challenges, and it's not unique to them. I remember you mentioned Google Glass. It's like, man, memories go back a decade, right, when that first came out. And that one was actually pretty refined in terms of the hardware, but it also was much more limited in what it could do. And even then you had the geek factor where it's like, oh, I had this one guy that I knew. And it's like he loved to parrot. He was walking around wearing these things, and it's like, oh God, here he comes again. It's like, it was like that. And I think so. I think we're like really far ahead still, or not there yet from a hardware standpoint. So I think it's going to be interesting over the next few years of the next generations develop. But here's what I am, from an enterprise perspective, what I think is going to be interesting. I think going all the way back to the part that people are, including Apple, is not talking about in this context, and that is the metaverse side of this. In the metaverse, people have this really, and Facebook has done a horrible job at cementing some of these ideas into our mind of what this represents, where you sit in this world in a dark room and you go into this whole other space. And I don't think that's, I think there's, a degree of that may happen, but from a work standpoint, where I think this is going to be fascinating is the ability to drive collaboration, meaningful, real collaboration. A lot of what you're talking about, the telepresence, that idea of bringing it to life, but with even greater integration, greater tooling, the ability to do it more dynamically with absolutely zero worry of where anyone is physically located. And I can totally see that. I can totally see you and I having some kind of a headset on and collaborating in a space when we're planning out this podcast where we're acting like we're in the same room working on this. And I think that could be just mind-blowing as this technology continues to evolve. So that's what I'm really excited to see, and I'm really hoping this sort of ushers us into that next phase of exploration.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's still kind of missing from augmented reality is the tactile aspect of it. So, for instance, I see that painting behind your head. If it were, say, a whiteboard, I would love to be able to actually write on that whiteboard, and we could work on that together in theory. There's it's hard to do something like that. So my wild guess here is that as Apple and Meta keep battling in the headset world, one of the things that we'll be working on is understanding where the positioning of like our actual limbs and bodies are in relation to the headset, and being able to kind of replicate that in some other virtual replication of either my side or your side, so we can work together more easily. That kind of whiteboarding capability is still tough to do. I mean, we can share a whiteboard, on a screen right now, but it's not the same as doing it in person in an office or home. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that while I'm still young enough to move around on my own power, that we're going to get a holodeck like in Star Trek. That's all I really want. Just be able to do that. You and I can join a holodeck and then sit down and have a virtual cup of coffee, and that's what I'm hoping for.
I know. All I ask for is a holodeck and the ability to visit the moon every year or so. That's it. Yes,
So,
but I also,
what other things do you want to talk about?
you know, one of the things that's been coming up for me a lot over the past year is kind of the economics of cloud computing. Over the past decade, obviously, cloud computing has gone from being kind of an interesting toy for developers, mostly on Amazon, to build some interesting big data toys. Some of them ended up being very important, but honestly, it was not a very large percentage of the IT bill. But now suddenly you have companies who see either Amazon or Azure or Google Cloud now being, call it a quarter of their IT bill and a significant percentage of their revenues or total costs, in trying to figure out what did we do wrong and how do we fix this. So we, over on our end at Amalgam Insights, we actually have an entire practice on what we have called both technology expense management, or IT FinOps, IT financial operations, where we look at how companies are cutting these costs. But honestly, even everything we look at in cloud bills and cloud contracts and cutting cloud costs is just one piece of the puzzle, because you're always looking for more cost efficient ways to do IT, which is honestly a bigger topic than even that. So I'm curious where you're seeing cloud computing cost challenges right now, or budget challenges, and how people are articulating that.
So I think it's fascinating. I'm glad you brought it up. It's something that I've been spending a lot of time talking about recently from a few different perspectives. One is there's the rise. You talked about IT FinOps, right? There's this rise of FinOps as a practice, and in part driven by the variable cost nature of cloud, which has caused a lot of enterprises to get hit with these massive budgets, these massive bills, and trying to like deal with it. And it sort of has represented a step change in the way we treat budgeting, right? Going from CapEx to OpEx is one thing, but now there's this variable cost nature and the relative decentralization of how we manage cloud services can open up the door. But my frustration has been exactly what you're talking about. Cloud is still just one piece. And while it is this explosive or potentially explosive piece, there's been this really long-standing challenge within IT organizations on how we manage cost overall, right? So IT financial management has been a discipline, a waning discipline for a very long time. There's something I think you maybe just alluded to it, technology business management, right? There's this whole idea of this entire part of the discipline. And I think, so, as I look at this, I'm excited from the standpoint that this perhaps is going to finally cause the issue of managing costs as a discipline to rise to the level that we actually give it the value and the attention that it always should have had. But my concern with FinOps, like so many frameworks and fads before it, is that it becomes too dogmatic and too narrowly focused, and we end up not actually tackling the bigger problem. Because if you only look at cloud cost, then you're only looking at a piece of the puzzle. And there is almost no, I think I can name one enterprise leader, and I haven't actually drilled him on this to know if this is actually true, but only one enterprise leader that I think authentically can claim to truly be 100% in the cloud. Everybody else is in some form of a hybrid state and will be for the foreseeable future, where they have all these different moving parts. And if I only focus this discipline on cloud, then I'm missing a huge chunk of it. But what I do think is interesting, specific to the cloud part of the question, is that you even look at AWS, right? Their closing keynote at reInvent this year was all about value cloud architectures, or I forgot what they called it, but this
The
idea
frugal
of
architect.
the frugal architect, right? Of actually focusing on the cost and not just ignoring it for a change. And the fact, if they're doing that from their main stage, that's clearly telling you that they're getting significant pressure and pushback to having better ways of managing that. And then there's a number of execs I've talked to that say they're not even going into the cloud because they keep penciling it out, and because their nature of their architectures are not dynamic enough to really justify the spend, that it's actually cheaper for them to run it on colos or in-house or whatever. So I think it's going to be a really fascinating sort of space. Clearly, we're still seeing growth by the major cloud providers. I don't expect that to stop. But I do think we're in a period of much greater rationalization, and the sheen has sort of come off a little bit, and the people are maybe the rose-colored glasses have come off. People, I think, are taking a much more rational view of everything.
Yeah, because when you're starting, it's very easy to use the cloud as a fractional server. Fantastic use of cloud, because it's easier to pay $50 for this than pay $1,000 for the real thing when you're getting started. But honestly, anytime you have a dedicated workload, it's always going to be easier to put that on a bare metal server at the end of the day, from a pure total cost of ownership perspective, assuming you have anybody in your company who has any idea how to do server operations. That's just the plain truth. The cloud can't beat you, because in that case, because they always have to hire somebody, and they're buying the same bare metal servers that you are. Maybe it's, maybe it on scale, but it's the same machine.
That brings up a really interesting point though that I'd love your take on, because the one thing I was talking to a CTO of the part of a large university, but he ran like a part of it anyway. And what was interesting is I was sort of probing on this particular point, and he said, well, the issue is that I am having trouble finding the staff that can do that. And I have only so much headcount, and I need to apply that headcount in ways that are creating, greater value for the organization versus running the server. And to your point, I have no doubt that would be cheaper for him to run this, because I know what these workloads were, to run this in-house. But his dynamic was I'm having trouble finding those people because I'm competing with Amazon, and B, I'm not going to get better headcount because I run that in-house. So I need to use that headcount for these other things, which is like almost a backward position if you think about it, but it just speaks to sort of the dynamics within an enterprise and the way enterprises budget. And so I'm curious if you think that's going to play where people actually do pay more than they have to, and they know it because they're just trying to make all the pieces fit.
Yeah, there's a weird balance between tech and personnel right now, and we're seeing it with the tech layoffs that are happening all over the place. And my personal opinion is there are going to be a lot of stuff is going to break over the next 6 to 12 months all over the place, and people are not going to really know why for another couple of years. But be that as it may, that's the decision being made now, that I can buy my way into having this taken care of, and never mind whether this is the cheapest way or the most cost efficient way or not. It happens to be the easiest way in this time.
Well, and I think that also speaks to two other issues that are sort of bubbling underneath the surface within the enterprise. And the first is that I've never been super bullish on the cloud, which obviously I was sort of wrong on that. In terms of, I remember in the early days of cloud, people were talking about it being so transformative. I'm like, the cloud is just a tool. It's not a transformative agent in and of itself. It's what you do with it, how you use it. But what I think was interesting is the cloud companies have won the battle insofar as, even outside of tech, outside of IT leaders and the business community, it is now sort of this expected and accepted norm. And so it is easier to justify to a certain extent cloud spend than it is
Mhm.
staff spend now. And I think that's this really sort of interesting dynamic playing out.
Right.
And then the second thing that I think is sort of aligned to that, particularly at within smaller enterprises, is what I've been hearing from a lot of execs now is that they're not cloud first, but they're SaaS first. That they're trying to get out of the entire tech infrastructure
Mhm.
business altogether and simply aligning the organization where they're buying these SaaS apps and their job is to amalgamate them and make them all work. But it's really about not running any of the tech stack at all. It's just buying these SaaS services, and that to me is fascinating. That's sort of this movement. So I think you play all this out, and then you get all these different parts. That it's a really interesting time. I mean, if I compare it to when I was running IT, it's like we owned everything, lock, stock, and barrel. We didn't buy anything. We were buying
Mhm.
physical everything, and so now it's like the dynamics of management are so different.
Yeah, and this goes a little bit back to some of the platform discussions we were having before that right now, over the past 4 years with, COVID and remote work and all of that, when you ask the application integration companies or the security companies how many apps are running over an enterprise network, the answer now is over 1,000 apps at any large enterprise. And it can scale to, many times that. But the average number for the billion-dollar plus enterprise is now over 1,000 apps, and some of that has to be rationalized because several hundred of those apps were picked up as perceived best in breed by a specific person who needed the tool for that job at that one time, not realizing that there were 14 other similar options within the organization. And also, it doesn't fit into any of the other integration or warehouse or all the mature enterprise IT practices that people think about. So now we're starting to see, okay, we did this cloud spend, and now we have to rationalize it, bring it back to the platform to some extent, cut the cloud costs to some extent, figure out what we actually need to do to some extent. It's like instead of digital transformation, we're in a digital rationalization phase. It seems.
Yeah, well, so as the diehard optimist, I actually think those go hand in hand. I do think that it is very difficult to drive and execute a transformational effort if you are bogged down in all of the mundacity of trying to just make all this stuff work together. And so I think that these are all sort of part of the same trend. I do think there's a risk. I think there's too many organizations that are pretending that they can buy everything. And I don't think that's the case. But what I do think is going to happen. This brings all the way back to the platform conversation and like the Zoho the conversation, right? If I can go and simplify by standardizing on a small handful of platforms using something like a Zoho or whatever, where I'm sort of offloading so much of the plumbing and all of the stuff that isn't adding value to the organization, but I need it, right? And so it just runs. Then that frees me up to then have resources that are dedicated to creating that very thin layer of technology that sits on top that actually creates competitive value for the organization. And to me, that's the essence of digital transformation. It's about how do I clear away all the stuff that's wasting my time, that is not a good use of my tech resources, so that I can, in fact, apply those tech resources to creating and delivering some form of technology into the marketplace, maybe to my employees if I'm highly employee centric, whatever it is. But how do I create advantage in the marketplace? And almost inevitably, that advantage is going to be driven by technology in some way. And so they all sort of fit together, right? And centralizing on platforms, allocating my staff appropriately, leveraging a platform that takes some of the stuff off and moving to SaaS, whatever, so that I can create some airspace and actually now go and innovate. And that, I think, is what is interesting. And I think that's where all these parts sort of start fitting together. But it's going to be incumbent upon an enterprise leader to actually take that last step and not just race to the bottom.
Right. We've talked about the alignment between IT and business. IT as a business, it's a buzzword and a cliche at this point, but at the same time, it's still stunning to me how infrequently you find IT leaders and more importantly, I would say IT middle managers who are comfortable talking to the business and able to actually translate what they do into business outcomes and the use cases that the rest of the business actually run into. It's just amazing to me that something like data, everybody talks about being a data-driven business. At this point, every data manager should have a good idea of how the rest of the company uses data, how a customer service rep uses data, how a truck driver uses data. Like, these are things that the data manager should know. That's not just a business concern, a line of business concern. That is a technical concern in this day and age.
Unquestionably.
Yeah. Great. On that note, I think that's a great way to kind of summarize and take a look back at what we talked about and what happened over the past week in tech. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you, Charlie, as always. And I'm looking forward to looking at what's happening in enterprise tech next week.
Very good. Looking forward to it.
All right.